Hello, my name is Zone, and welcome to part 4 of my Malazan reread of Deadhouse Gates. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, oh, it's been such a long time since our last video. Well, how do you think I feel? To you, it's been a measly 9 days since my last video, but I haven't filmed in over 2 weeks, so just a forewarning, this one might be a little bit rough. For those of you that missed my update, I moved to a new city. I'm in a temporary place right now. I got a new job. Things have been crazy. Things have been hectic. You can hear the sirens outside. Things are crazy. Things are hectic. But you know what? Malazan is forever. And I finally finished part 4 of this book, which is a behemoth 300 pages just in one part alone. I finished it. I want to talk about it. And as always with these parts, guys, there's so much going on that I'm definitely going to miss things. So I want you guys in the comments to let you know what I missed, the parts that you like that I don't have time to talk about, because I had so many tabs, and for me to talk about every single one of these tabs just in part 4 alone would take way too long. And I just distilled it down to the basics. And for those of you who read along for the first time, I'm only spoiling this book and Gardens of the Moon. I'm not going ahead. That is for the next video that'll come on this channel, where I'm going to do like full series-wide spoiler review, things that I noticed, these dark pink tabs. We'll be going over that in the next video. But what I want to do for the structure of this video is I'm going to go through each like character POV storyline and just talk about the things that stuck out to me. I think one of the greatest things about this book in particular, which didn't really happen in Gardens of the Moon, Gardens of the Moon kind of had like the classic Malazan convergence, where all the storylines kind of come together in one epic battle or sequence of some kind. But I think the reason why Deadhouse Gates is unique is it's really, every storyline doesn't really coincide with each other. There's not like one big battle where all the characters come together. I feel like every single storyline, Felicyn's, Fiddler's, Calam's, The Chain of Dogs, all could have been their own books with completed story arcs that like you don't even need any crossover, except for, like for the beginning with the Calam and Fiddler when they're together. There's really no crossover. Thematically, there is a lot of crossover, and you know, it's me. I'm going to talk about the thematic crossover because if you watched the last video, I talked about how it was the theme of like repeating history and the cycles of history, and how the obelisk was activated in the 7 cities, right? The past, present, and future is now available for us to move past like this endless cycle of death and children suffering and dying and rebellion and getting crushed and all that bad stuff. This is the opportunity for the people of the 7 cities to break out of that. And did they? In some ways they did. In some ways they didn't. It depends on the storyline. So let's just jump straight into it. The first storyline we're going to talk about is Felicyn's storyline. So one of the great reveals at the end of last part was when Leomin and the Toblakai are like waiting for the Shaikh to be reborn, and like a person comes up, it's a girl, you're like, oh my god, it's gonna be Apsalar. It's not Apsalar, it's Felicyn, and it's Heberic, and she is the Shaikh reborn. So there's a great sequence of that where like where Heberic's like, I don't know if you want to do this, like if you're wrong, it might destroy you. She does it, she doesn't get destroyed, but she's not reborn in the way that it was like prophesized. And there's a great line which I think plays directly into the theme, where they talk about how this time, Shaikh was not reborn. Felicyn is not the Shaikh reborn. She is the Shaikh remade, which is perfectly fit into the theme, right? Because if it was reborn, Felicyn would just be the same Shaikh that was an older woman that got killed. But instead, it's taking like the wisdom and the power of Shaikh and like the power of the whirlwind, but it still has Felicyn's some of her wants and her past trauma and how that plays into her character. Because one of the most interesting things about her after she gets this power up, her dialogue could be just from another person else. She's not as snarky, she's not as bitter, she's not as like downright like sadistic in the way that she treats people. She's like wise, and she like knows things other people wouldn't know. She like knows the history of the sands and all that magical stuff. But she's very, very determined to get her revenge on Tavor. And there's a great like badass line where she's like, I'm going to start this whirlwind, and guess what the Empress is going to send to stop me? It's going to be my sister. And there's another great line a little bit later when they're talking about that, and they're like, the difference between this fight and the last fight is the Malazans are like so great at adapting to combat. They're like unbeatable in war. Their army's so good. But the advantage that the rebellion and the Shaikh has is that Tavor doesn't know that her sister is the Shaikh. So it's just like that dynamic at play though, and it's so fascinating. We don't get that showdown in this book, which I think definitely would have been a rush if you try to fit that into there. The book kind of ends with like Tavor's coming, and she's gonna get vengeance for what happens in the other storyline we're gonna be talking about. But it was a great storyline. I think it was a great end for Felician's character. Of all the storylines, this one had like the least climactic ending, because it was kind of like once she became Shaikh, it was just them going to like the camp and her meeting the camp followers and prepping for the big event, which is going to be the showdown between the sisters, right? But there was a great like emotional character moment towards the end there when Felician fully adopts the Shaikh persona, and she adopts a little girl, like a little orphan, and she names her Felician, and she's talking with Heberick, and she's like, oh, like, isn't this like such a great name? Like, it's about, it like means like innocence and like the possibility of future. And like Heberick is just like thinking about how all of this was like taken away from Felician, and how that's not how he saw her at all. And he's like, I just don't see it that way. And then she like, in this moment of empathy, she's like, oh, like, don't feel bad for me. Like, it's fine, everything that happened to me. And that just destroys Heberick, because it's not fine. It's so tragic in the fact that she is okay with it now, and she's been burdened like with this godhood power. And she's still 15, and you have to keep that in mind, like all this has happened to her, and she's just like, oh, like, don't worry about me, like, it's completely fine. And literally the worst things that could happen to a person have happened to her in the past couple months. Just breaks his heart, and that's a great moment between the two of them. But from the start of this book to the end of this book, Felician's come a long way, and they drew a great parallel when Heberick was talking about when they finally arrive at the rebellion camp, and everyone's like cheering for her. It's like, oh my God, Shaikh. He's like, remember the last time we were in a crowd of people? All the way back to the beginning when they were just like throwing stones at her. And just from that to like the leader of the rebellion, it's just a crazy development for her character. And definitely the first time reading it, I had no idea that was going to happen, because it's so out of left field, right? In terms of development. But in terms of the story going through the adventure, it makes perfect sense. And there was a great also part two where they talk about like, oh, like, you were destined to do this? That's so weird. And Felician's like, no, it was actually an accident. Shaikh maybe knew she was going to die. Maybe she didn't actually know. But she died, and she didn't know it was going to be me. It just happened to be me. And Heberick's like, well, it had to have been fate, right? He's like, no, it was just an accident. But now I'm Shaikh, and now I'm remade. It's Shaikh version 2, Felician edition. And in some ways, that's moving forward from that cycle of history. In some ways, that's very terrifying. And we're going to see the conclusion of that in a later book. I can assure you that. Not the next book, though. Not to spoil anything, it's not going to happen in the next book. We're going back to our good old boys back on Genebacus in the Panian Domain. Okay? We're going all the way back there, in case you didn't already know. Moving on from there, we're going to go to the Fiddler storyline. So the reveal there, just to keep you in the loop, I guess, if you forget, is that the Path of Hands is not where Iskropus said it was, because he's a little trickster boy. He's a little devious. It was back at the original camp, which Ikariam and Mappo found out like hundreds of pages ago. But what he was leading them to, all the shapeshifters, the divers, and the Soul Taken, was the Azath House. So the big plan all along was to get all the shapeshifters there, like, oh, I'm going to be a god. No, you're going to get sucked up to an old, dusty old house. It's going to keep you in roots forever. Congratulations. We know Fiddler wants to go there because they're going to use that to teleport to Malaz City to help Kalam with killing the Empress. We knew that already. So there's kind of the convergence, right, where it's Fiddler, it's Ikariam and Mappo, it's Crocus and Apsalar, and Iskropust, and all the shapeshifters coming in there. And then we also learned that there was a bargain made with Shadow Throne and the Azath House that, like, okay, we're gonna guide them all here. You're gonna take all the shapeshifters, and like, I'm not entirely sure what he got out of that, other than just like taking the threat of like a shapeshifter god out of the way. And I'll talk more about Shadow and the Cotillion, because I think their storyline, especially in this part, is very, very interesting. And I want to know what people think about that. But the other deal that was made was that Ikariam would be taken by the Azath House as well. Because we realize that he's this Jekyll and Hyde character where he enters this rage that could destroy entire cities. Like, the more angry, he's like the Hulk. The angrier he gets, the stronger he gets, the more destruction he wreaks. And Mappo's whole job, when he was assigned by these Nameless Ones characters, was to eventually get to this point where Ikariam could be trapped forever and not be a threat to anybody. So the nameless ones, their original purpose is like, Mappo, when you get to this point, you got to make the right decision. Obviously, they didn't anticipate that they'd become the bestest of buds, right? And the tragedy of Ikariam, and we talked this before in the last video, it plays into the theme of history because it's like him losing his memory, him searching for his memory, but him realizing his memory realizes that he has to be stopped, and he enters a rage, and he has to be unconscious, and he forgets his memory. It's an endless cycle there. So then Mappo finally has the choice to break this cycle. He could get his friend trapped for eternity and end his goal and avenge his village, which was destroyed by Ikariam. Put that on hold for a second. But because the tragedy is that Ikariam is so pleasant when he's not, and obviously his deadly rage, but he's so nice, he's so thoughtful, he values Mappo's friendship so much that even when Mappo and Ikariam have this great discussion where Ikariam realizes the monster that he is, and he goes, essentially, absolutely, the sirens are on my end, by the way, if you could hear them. He essentially says, I absolutely understand what you have to do, and he tells everybody there, let me be taken. And then there's also a very scary, ominous line where it's like, Ikariam, if you enter a rage, you might kill the Azath and free everything that's ever trapped in the history of mankind. And Talanamasskind, and Jagged Time, and every time of existence in the Malazan world. And Ikariam's like, whoa, like I'm really that strong? And they're like, you might be, you just might be. But he decides that he's willing to sacrifice himself, he will do it, but Mappo just won't let him because he loves him too much, and they've come too far together. He decides to maintain the cycle of Ikariam's ignorance and forgetting his memory, and he knocks him unconscious and he takes him away. And I think it's a beautiful moment, and it's, on paper, it's the wrong decision because the man is a world-ending threat. However, you just empathize with him so much, and Ikariam really is just so sweet that you don't want to see him go. And it is like kind of justified by the reveal that the nameless ones were the ones that destroyed Mappo's hometown and just blamed it on Ikariam. It's like, dude, like Ikariam did actually destroy countless cities, committed genocide multiple times, yet you had to fake killing Mappo's entire civilization? I don't really know about that one, nameless ones. Maybe you should perhaps stay nameless, because when I find you, y'all can do something naughty. And by that, I mean kill you. Anyway, you know my feelings on the subject. So that's kind of justified by that, and even the other characters, like Absolar has a moment where she's like, yeah, like if I was Mappo, I probably wouldn't sacrifice him either because Ikariam's just so cool, and he's so nice, so why would we do that to him? So put him in eternal torment. So that's their storyline, and what else do I got on that? We also just, and grow out to the other characters, we have Crocus. He kind of like, it's very subtle because he doesn't really have much to do in this book besides just go along with the trip. He kind of begins a descent of a kind. In the first book, Gardens of the Moon, he was like that naive kid. He's looking for love. Oh, like, ooh, a girl I stole from her. I want to give it back because I love her. I want to become rich, and that way she'll love me. This book, he just becomes more and more bitter, more and more jaded. And there was the line where Mappo noted that Crocus started like emulating Ikariam's like mannerisms, like behavior and like speech patterns and stuff like that. And like Mappo had a great line. He's like, well, which part is he emulating? Is he emulating the nice, sweet Ikariam that everybody loves, or the world-ending rage? He's not quite sure. And just in general, Crocus seems a little bit more of like a moody teenager in this book, which some people don't like. But the thing I do like about Crocus is that he still is like super aware. Like he's not a fool. A lot of times Mappo is surprised by how much Crocus is able to keep up. Like he realizes that Ikariam is this world-ending threat. He recognizes that dynamic between the two of them, like before most characters even. So he is very aware. He's very smart and quick. He's just kind of like a little bit more jaded, and he's like all of a sudden practicing with his knives. He's like becoming a killer in some ways. And then the other, I feel like big character, like Fiddler is just Fiddler, man. Like he's like Mr. Consistent, right? You gotta love him. Absolar, there's a great character moment with her that I wanted to point out where she's talking about, because the whole worry at the beginning of the book was Fiddler was like, I don't know, like, is she just as evil as Sari was, and she's just hiding right now? Is it going to come back? Like, what's going to happen with her? And we learned that she's definitively a good guy. And she has this moment where she says, like, the wax witch from the first book that protected me completely from Cotillian's possession, she instilled in me this desire, this drive to protect her loved ones. And there's a great line where it's like, this wax witch from the first book, like she lost everybody. She lost her entire family members. She's like, it very easily, she should have been a bitter old woman. But instead, all that meant was that she just wanted to protect the ones that she had even more. And her final act of life, we know, was putting this protection over Apsalar and saving her from the worst of the effects of Cotillion's possession. And that feeling is kind of passed down. So we know that Apsalar's like main drive is to protect the one that she loved. And she's reunited with her father, and then her and Crocus and her father are sent back to her hometown at the end of the book, to be continued from there. But I thought that was a really sweet moment. But going back to Shadowthrone and Cotillion, I feel like this book is radically different in terms of the way that they act upon the story. In the first book, they're almost like cartoonishly villains. Like Shadowthrone's like, I'm gonna release the hounds and slaughter an entire town, and then Cotillion's like, I'm gonna possess a little girl and like ruin her life and like make her dad disappear, and then make her like torture people when I'm in her body, and then like only go out because Animator Rake's threatening me to put me in eternal hell when I'm chained to a wagon. That's the only reason why I'm gonna free her. But at the end of that book, he's kind of like, yeah, that was a mistake. And we're kind of like, why was it a mistake? Is it just because it was an inefficient strategy or because you feel bad? We find out in this book that Cotillion does feel bad, actually. He's talking to Apt, the Aptorian demon, and he's talking to the kid, Panic, who like the demon kind of adopts, and he like thanks the demon. He's like, you showed me the power of compassion, the power of being like emotional and caring for other people, which is a major theme of this series. And then he learned it from a demon. He's like, I went to godhood to escape those feelings, and like you showed me the value of them, which is a really sweet moment. And he tells Panic that he has a daughter of a sort, and he's like, oh well, you got to forgive her. He's like, no, like she's the one that needs to forgive me because I messed up. So like he sees Apsalar as like this daughter figure now, and he feels this connection to her because they share some of his memories, and he wants to make it up to her. So he's turning a new leaf in a way, and also Shadowthrone shows a lot of sympathy in this book too. He obviously saves Panic and the rest of the children. He makes them a little child army of like a million children, which he just gives to Kalam at the end in Manala. He's like, hey, here's your new kids, which is a weird moment, but he like saves those kids. He does at the end of the book give like, he sends Apsalar and Crocus wherever they want, sends Fiddler wherever he wants, sends Kalam wherever he wants. He's kind of helpful there. Obviously, he saved Apsalar's father in the beginning, gave him new hands. He's like, didn't kill him, just sent him off to serve Iskrull Plus, which in some ways might be worse than death. The guys are really annoying. In a good way, I love him. And then also, in the final battle in the Path of Hands, he sends the hounds to help them out. So I feel like the Shadowthrone Cotillion is a lot more benevolent of a force. Like they're providing help. They don't really do anything evil in this book, to my estimation. It didn't seem like they were doing anything overly evil. And even when Kalam decides he's not going to kill the Empress, he's like, yeah, well, if I really wanted her dead, she'd be dead anyway, is basically what Shadowthrone said. He's like, I'm not really mad you're going to stop. It's fine. It's like, okay, well, it's not really on brand with why you wanted to possess Sari in the first place, but thanks, I guess. Thanks that you're not mad, that you're not going to destroy us with your hounds and power of godhood, newly acquired. But basically at this point, everybody knows that they're the Emperor. The Kellerman's the Emperor, and Cotillion is Dancer. That's pretty common knowledge among the main characters at this point. And just going to Kalam, my boy is the action set piece generator. He has the great moment on the boat where like the pirates attack and the treasure like betrayed them. He has a great moment there where he's teamed up with Saoki Lan, who turns out to be Pearl. And then the betrayal of Pearl to Kalam, stabbed in the center of the boat, and he has to fight all the Claw like while injured. Such a great moment. And no spoilers or anything, but it's just like a shadow of the greatest Kalam moment of all time, which is coming up in a few books. You gotta wait a couple months for that video, but let me tell you, it's the greatest thing ever. It just reminded me of that. That's why I said it. But that scene is so awesome. He's just taking on whole like hordes of assassins, and he's like weak and he's bleeding out. But the most like important moment was this conversation with the Empress, and this one's a little bit looser of how it ties into the theme, but I think it still works. So he wanted to kill the Empress and move things forward, right? Which in a way would be continuing the cycle of like the Dancer Kelvin assassination, new ruler. But then he speaks to the Empress, and she tells him, which is just already revealed earlier in the book, in the Chain of Dog storyline, but Dujek was not actually outlawed. It was a plot between Dujek and the Empress in order so they could get Animander and Kaladin Brood and the Crimson Guard to help fight the Panian Domin, which will be covered in the next book. So it was a ploy. It's not real. So she's like, listen, Clamp, like relax, all right? Your friends aren't outlawed. Tayshrin just got a little trigger happy with his bombs, blowing up your men. It's fine. I didn't want him to do that. And like he got the sense that like she was trying to do her best, which was enough for him to like spare her life. But it was an interesting moment that he chose to move past that. He's basically like, and the Emperor says something like, oh, like, he only didn't kill me because he realized I wasn't there. But then it seems like Clam's like, I'm just not going to hunt you anymore. I really couldn't care less anymore. Because you think you're doing what's best, and that's enough for me, even if you're not doing it that well. Because we learned from earlier in the book that, like, if it was the Emperor, he would have knocked down the 7th Emperor's rebellion before it even started. And she's just not as good as him, apparently. But he lets her go. And she should be grateful, because Clam is probably the coolest guy ever to live. And then finally, guys, we got to talk about it. I know, I put it off for as long as possible. The Chain of Dogs. Any first-time readers, I want to hear you guys' thoughts on how this book ended. Because the first time I read it, man, I was just gut-wrenched. It's horrible. It's the worst tragedy that's ever tragedy. Reading it the second time, knowing where it was going, I found it a lot less sad. Not any less tragic, but I just felt less emotionally attached to it. And I was stuck more on like the thematic elements, as I do. And because I said in the last video, like I was talking about like history repeating itself and like how you need to like remember stuff and like the importance of 2 historians being major characters in this book, part 4 is where Coltaine is really emphasized as like, I was gonna say like the harbinger of the theme. That doesn't really make any sense though. But Coltaine knows what the theme of the book is, and he is trying his darndest to make sure that it goes the right way. Because multiple times he goes out of his way to tell Duker, like, you need to be writing this down. Memory is the most important thing in the Malazan army. Not the soldier, it's their memory. Everyone needs to remember this. That's why you are the most important person in this army. And that's why when he gets the magic vial that'll save his life, he gives it to Duker instead and says, you need to have it, you need to live, you need to tell the story. It doesn't matter if I die. Because if I live and everyone forgets this, it's all over. And this is reinforced too, like after Duker gets to Erin and he sees like the nobles there, and the nobles turn on him, they change the narrative that Coltaine killed all the refugees. He was a horrible leader. Immediately they flip the narrative so that Coltaine's a bad guy, Malacrel's a good guy, who's the worst person in the world. Everyone hates Malacrel. Without Duker there to tell the story, it's all for nothing, and the narrative is changed, and the Wiccans are horrible. Obviously, it's tragic because Coltaine, even though he like go ahead, refugees, like you go on ahead, you make it, I'll do the final stand. He makes it all the way to the gate. They still don't save him. And then when they're like, oh, Duker, we're gonna kill you too because the false narrative. They take him out, and then the dumbass High Fist gets betrayed by Malacrel, which is a great callback early because when Clam was like talking to Keneb, he's like, oh, like this guy said the gistle was an Aaron. What does that mean? Keneb's like, I don't know what that word means. And then Duker's like, you're a gistle, and I hate you. So it's like an ancient term because he's a historian, right? He knows old words. And then Keneb's like, wait a minute, and he's the one that he tells Blistig to keep the guard back. That way they can't take over Aaron. So it's a great payoff there. Because I completely forgot about that little conversation. And there's a moment where Keneb's like, wait a minute, where did I hear that word before? Boom, I remember. Let me save the city. He saves the city, but Duker is killed. And the most tragic part I noticed on this read, which I didn't notice on the first reread, I know I'm speaking a million miles per hour, was once the whirlwind gets to Aaron, or gets near like where they killed 10,000 soldiers that weren't even a part of the chain of dogs, they were just waiting in Aaron, they come out, 10,000 more people slaughtered, which is an absurd number, thanks to Malacrel's treachery and Pornkel's stupidity. He deserved to be killed. Because Hebrik is blind, he can't see that his friend, who he sent Culp to save, Duker sent Culp to save Hebrik. Hebrik is blind, so he can't see that he's by the corpse of his friend. And they don't say it's Duker, but they say, oh, it's an old man, he's a soldier, which is what they call him in the whole book. So it's obvious who it is. And he's right there. And he's like, why? He's like, who is this man? Why do I hear a god laughing? What is going on? Everyone's like, it's just a random old guy. And he's like, I don't feel like it is, but okay, I guess we'll take your word for it because I'm blind. That hit me hard. Not the betrayal because I knew that was coming, but I'm like, I did not notice that. I did not notice that his friend made him, he was right there. There was a great moment where Duker's like, I'm finally going to be with all my friends that died. I can be resurrected with them or live with them in the afterlife. But we know death in Malazan isn't what it seems, right? The crow moment where he gets killed by one of the Malazan soldiers. That way the crows can come and save Coltaine's soul. Horde of crows. And the book ends with the crows like instilling the soul into the new baby. Can't wait for a sequel series where Coltaine is new. That's going to be cool. But the vial on Duker's chest, and then these little monkey boys come in. They're talking, and they say, all right, time to resurrect our boy. So Duker's not gone. He's going to be resurrected in one way or another. And in a way, that's all Cotain ever wanted, because the story will be told eventually. But it's just a tragic, tragic ending to a great story, to a fantastic story. By Duker's survival, hopefully, the cycles of time, the cycles of history will unfold anew. And because Shaik was not reborn but remade, this battle's going to shape up differently. Let's just say that. Let's just say that. I hope you guys are enjoying these weekly videos. I know it's been over a week since the last one, but I'm pretty close to a week. I'm pretty close, considering all the stuff I had to do in the past 2 weeks. Considering I did a pretty good job, I think. Next month is Memories of Ice. It's a great one. Great thematic book. And I think that if you're fans of theme like me, you're going to really like this one if you haven't already. And if you already read the series completely, in the next couple days or so, I'm going to film it today, hopefully. If I'm wearing the same shirt, you know that's true. So that'll come out, and I'll be like talking full spoiler stuff. I don't think there's as much as the last book, Gardens of the Moon, but there's some thematic stuff that I want to hit on, and just some cool stuff, and questions. I had questions as well, so expect that video shortly. This video's gone on long enough. As always, be sure to like and subscribe if you like the video, and thanks for sticking around.